first of all, let me remind you that this is recorded because you will be able to watch it on our website, www.newplazacinema.org. And Norma is at our theater today. So I'm going immediately to pass the floor to Max, who is going to be our lead person here. And look at him. I'm not going to introduce him. You just look at him. Is he going to introduce himself? Max, please.
Merci, Marianne. And good afternoon, friends and supporters of New Plaza Cinema. It's such a pleasure to be back here to discuss a brilliant film from William Wyler of 1949, The Heiress, which follows an incredible presentation that one of our guests today, Stephen Smith, gave on Olivia de Havilland this Wednesday for New Plaza Cinema Online. It was a fabulous presentation on her life and career. And today we are going to be focusing on, Stephen may disagree, I don't think he will, possibly Olivia de Havilland's greatest screen performance as Catherine in The Heiress. This was director William Wyler's first film since his Oscar-winning The Best Years of Our Lives from 3 years before, a stunningly acted and designed adaptation of the 1947 Ruth and Augustus Getz play, The Heiress, which was inspired by the 1880 Henry James novel, Washington Square, which, if anyone remembers, was refilmed under that title by Agnieszka Holland in the late 90s with Jennifer Jason Leigh taking on the Catherine role. Although William Wyler did not specifically open up the play per se from its theatrical origins, The Heiress does not take on the appearance of filmed theater like many stage adaptations by lesser talents. It has impeccable cinematographic composition, which Dan Cahill, our expert on that area, will be commenting more on today. And the staging brings to mind some of the finest moments of William Wyler's 1941 filming of Lillian Hellman's play, The Little Foxes. A lot of very powerful manipulations of figures within the camera frame, sometimes in what we call deep focus, where the foreground and background are very sharp, and other times when they're not. And I know Daniel will comment more on that. We're going to start with the original 1949 trailer for this Paramount release, which fascinatingly promotes William Wyler as much as it does the stars, giving us a sense of how Wyler was recognized. And I believe we are going to be muting somebody who has their audio on. Sorry about that distraction. Let us now take a look at the original trailer for The Heiress.
Olivia de Havilland, winner of the Academy Award for To Each His Own, acclaimed for her arresting performance in The Snake Pit, now confirms her position as dramatic queen of the screen with her poignant and unforgettable portrayal of The Heiress. Co-starring with her is Montgomery Clift, whose phenomenal rise to stardom in Red River has made him the most sought-after young actor on the screen. Now he finds a role which gives full expression to his romantic appeal as the dashing young fortune hunter who makes love to the heiress. With them, Ralph Richardson, one of the world's great names of stage and screen. Miriam Hopkins, returning to films after a triumphant stage tour. One of Paramount's brightest young stars, Mona Freeman, and Vanessa Brown. These names head the distinguished cast of The Heiress. His warmth of human understanding, his sure sense of dramatic values have made William Wyler's name on a motion picture the guarantee of great and enduring entertainment. Twice winner of the Academy Award for the direction of The Best Years of Our Lives and Mrs. Miniver, he now follows those unforgettable films with his Paramount triumph, The Heiress. award-winning Broadway stage hits of the decade, The Heiress was adapted from Henry James' penetrating novel of a woman who cast aside all the conventions she lived by to hold the man she wanted.
He must come. He must take me away. He must love me.
Catherine, you must take hold of yourself.
No, no, Morris must take hold of me. Morris will love me. For all those who didn't.
You may be wondering what's the deal with the French subtitles. This was taken from a French DVD promotion of that motion picture. The Heiress is a very powerful, very unsettling, and very class-conscious look at mid-19th century New York City. Despite some liberties taken with the original literary source, the Heiress is actually very respectful of the time period in terms of performances and dialogue. And that normally shouldn't be an issue, but today, to anyone who watches period dramas on streaming services like, I won't mention names, but the major streaming services, there's not a lot of authenticity in the way people talk and the way they appear. Whereas in this film, it's very much in keeping with the language and the manners and the mannerisms of the 19th century people at that class level in the 19th century. There is peerless technical support from cinematographer Leo Tover, from art director John Meehan, from composer Aaron Copeland, who Stephen Smith, our guest, is going to talk more about, and of course, costume designer Edith Head. For the Heiress, William Wyler insisted that everything be historically correct, which contributes to the impact that I just talked about. Edith Head deliberately, according to one account, made things purposely gap or wrinkle in the wrong place. And this is Edith Head talking. I would cut a collar too high or a sleeve a bit too short. If Catherine's dress had ruffles, it had a few too many ruffles combined with too much ribbon and a bit too much lace, reflecting her unsophisticated taste. And apparently, according to Edith Head, William Wyler is such a perfectionist that since the Heiress was set in the 1840s and the 1850s, we had to deal with two periods. This is Edith Head talking. We had crinolines, we also had hoops, a slightly different silhouette. There were scenes in which Olivia de Havilland got dressed. You saw her in petticoats and little corsets and in corset covers. Wyler even sent me to a fashion institute in New York to be sure that every button and every buttonhole was absolutely accurate. If I had to choose a picture I did that was absolutely perfect down to the tiniest buttonhole, it was the Heiress. Wyler insisted on it. The Henry James novel was published in 1880. The ending was slightly altered for the stage and screen by playwrights and screenwriters Ruth and Augustus Getz to give the character an act of retributory justice at the end by having Catherine pretend to once again be willing to elope with Montgomery Clift's Morris character, but then locking the door and closing the curtains, giving him a taste of his own medicine. In the Henry James book, she simply sends him off into the night without giving him any hopes that she will consider marriage or resume their friendship. And at the end of the Henry James novel, Catherine has returned to doing her knitting work as the male figure disappears. The film was based on the Broadway play, The Heiress, which ran for a year, starting September of 1947, over 400 performances in which Wendy Hiller played Catherine, and I would have loved to have seen this. Basil Rathbone played her father, the role brilliantly played in the film by Ralph Richardson, who had played the doctor's character when the Heiress played on the stage in London. Patricia Colling, who we know as Teresa Wright's mother in Shadow of a Doubt by Alfred Hitchcock, played the character of Lavinia on stage. There were subsequent revivals on Broadway with Jane Alexander playing the part of Catherine in 1976. Cherry Jones played her in 1995. Jessica Chastain played her in 2013 opposite David Strathern as the father. And on stage in London, Peggy Ashcroft played her. The performance by Ralph Richardson, we can talk more about that. I consider it an astonishing performance, and must have been very intimidating for Olivia de Havilland to play opposite Richardson, but she certainly does hold her own, especially towards the end of the narrative. This was an expensive picture, over $2.6 million in production costs. It finished at number 30 at the box office in its year. Number 1 was Samson and Delilah, so there's no accounting for taste. But joining me now to talk more about the star of the Heiress, Olivia de Havilland, and her impact on getting the project made, and then we're going to talk more about other elements of the film. I'm very pleased to have our guest lecturer from Wednesday, Stephen Smith, returning. He's a documentarian and an author, and he knows a lot about Olivia de Havilland. Welcome back, Stephen. Ah, there you are. Oh, we need to hear you.
Sorry, I clicked and I did not click sufficiently with enough force. No, I was just saying how glad I am to be with you all and to see this film, which I have loved for so many years. And yes, happy to talk a little about, I've seen the Broadway play and I know the book. And I would say that Ruth and Augustus Getz made all the right decisions in adapting Washington Square. And they were very smart in writing that if you get a program, for the play, it says suggested by Henry James as Washington Square, because they didn't want all of the people who love the book so much to be disappointed. But in addition to the difference that you mentioned, Max, of the ending, the jilting sequence, the elopement that doesn't happen, that's also much softer in the book. It isn't a sort of momentous thing at night where she suddenly realizes what's happened. It's more gradual, and James's prose is a little more arch. So I think that the playwrights created a far more effective dramatic piece. And Olivia de Havilland apparently was alerted to it by Louis Milestone, who was a friend. She was in Los Angeles. She had gotten out of this contract at Warner Brothers that was keeping her under contract and not giving her very good roles. She had already won an Oscar for one of her post-Warner Brothers movies, and she wanted to build on that momentum and find another really terrific part. So when Milestone recommended this play in Broadway, she traveled across the country, saw it, loved it, and put the wheels in motion to have it adapted to film. And she didn't own it, but she was thinking about who she wanted to direct. And her initial thought apparently was George Cukor, who was not available. And her second choice, fortunately for us, was William Wyler, who was available and getting a bit frustrated because it had been 2 years since The Best Years of Our Lives, which swept the Oscars, and he too wanted to build on the momentum of that film. So he traveled to New York, saw the play, loved it, and the two of them had Paramount buy the rights to the play. They very smartly had the playwrights adapt it for the screen. And as you've mentioned, Max, Wyler, working with cinematographer Leo Tover, certainly managed to retain the power of and the claustrophobia, if you will, of the play at times, without it feeling in any way like that was one of those, film stage play adaptations. And it's interesting that for the part of Morris, apparently Errol Flynn was briefly considered. And if you think about the fact that Basil Rathbone played the part of the Doctor in London, and had they cast him as well, you would have had this very unlikely reteaming of the Adventures of Robin Hood cast in this movie. But Flynn was literally barely able to stand on his previous film, so I think he was probably not in the running for long. And Montgomery Clift had this meteoric Rise with Red River. So he was cast.
Well, what is it? Because there was controversy about Montgomery Clift in the film. My go-to source is always the Monthly Film Bulletin in England. When that film came out in 1950, the critic wrote that Clift misses the mark completely, exhibiting genuine charm and tenderness at moments where a smooth and self-assured power of attraction is called for. What do you think of that? Agree, disagree?
I think that reading contemporary reviews, that is reviews of the time when films came out, is usually just an exercise in for me, it's painful because you see how many good films are dismissed and how many bloated, pretentious films are praised. And of course, Bosley Crowther was famous in his lifetime as the chief critic of New York Times, and now he's synonymous with kind of, boneheaded poor choices about movies that ultimately got him fired. But I say that contemporary critics think that all three of the stars are magnificent, and four if you include Miriam Hopkins. And Clift was interested in the film. He wanted to work with Wyler, but he was a very sensitive and at times insecure person, also a very charismatic and warm and funny one. But I just wanted to say that during the making of this movie, it was certainly a polite situation, but it was a set with a lot of tension on it. Wyler and Olivia got on very well. He did do his famous 45 takes for one shot, and she said that she didn't mind that because she knew he was going for the same thing she was, which was perfection. But she said, I did find it curious that he often printed take 2 after doing those 45. So they got along, but Clift felt very insecure and you mentioned intimidation. Olivia wasn't intimidated by Ralph Richardson, but Clift very much was, because Richardson came on the set with such authority, and apparently on the set he acted like Dr. Sloper. He ignored Olivia de Havilland, so she wasn't very fond of him. When they would do their scenes together, at least in one, you recall his gloves. He was evidently kind of flapping his gloves in a way that Olivia instantly knew was a shrewd actor trying to upstage her. And she and Wyler were so close that Wyler was careful to frame out Richardson's hands so it wouldn't be in the film without telling him. So you had Clift intimidated by Richardson. You had Clift anxious about working with Wyler because Wyler had a reputation for being so demanding, and Clift evidently said quietly to Wyler that he would take the job if you promised, quote, not to bawl me out in front of the crew. And Wyler said, absolutely, I won't do that. And in his private diary, Clift wrote that he resented the time that Wyler was spending with Olivia, which is pretty strange because she is the main character in the film and has a very difficult transition to make, which I think she does superbly. And Clift also ruffled a few feathers because he insisted on having his acting coach, Mira Rostova, on the set. And so Wyler tolerated that. And I think the results were completely worth it. And Clift was the biggest box office draw when this movie came out. And Olivia de Havilland had a very funny comment when asked by Robert Osborne about Miriam Hopkins, who was also a famous upstager of actors, or at least someone who tried to do that. And Olivia told Bob Osborne, Miriam was no problem at all. She thought the film was all about her. So they got through it all, and it was a very painstaking shoot. And the main conflict that I found on it that I find interesting, and I don't know if you want to go there yet, is regarding the score and Aaron Copeland.
Please. So Aaron Copeland, I mean, he hadn't done a lot of Hollywood scores, but he was famous for the score he did 10 years earlier for Louis Milestone's Of Mice and Men.
Yes.
Tell us where he was at this stage and how he got involved, and your thoughts on the score itself.
Well, I think it's a magnificent score, and it shows what a good composer Copeland was for film, even though we think of him now primarily for his ballets and concert works. He had begun working in film in the 30s. He was a friend of Bernard Herrmann's going back to the early 30s, and Herrmann, of course, was working a great deal in film, and they spoke. So those were two men who both saw no difference between writing for, say, the concert hall and writing for film. Yes, your approach was different. You factored things in differently, but they didn't look down on it. Although it must be said that one of the reasons that Copeland was enthusiastic about doing this was that his salary was $15,000, which is about $200,000 today, and concert music was not bringing in anything like that, even if it was very popular. And so where was he in his career? Well, he was in a mixed place by the end of the 1940s. He was celebrated as the composer of concert works like Appalachian Spring and Lincoln Portrait. So he had sort of become the sound of American concert music. At the same time, he had been involved in a lot of left-wing groups. He had scored a film called The North Star that was about Russia during the war. And the blacklist was just starting. The hearings were beginning in the late 40s when this movie was being made. And if Copeland had wanted to continue having a career in Hollywood films in the 1950s, that would have been problematic because of the blacklist and just how quickly people could be kicked out of Hollywood for any sort of leftist leanings. But fortunately for him, this was a very specific job. He respected William Wyler, and Wyler had commissioned a wonderful Americana score on Best Years of Our Lives from Hugo Friedhofer that had won an Oscar. So Wyler was sensitive musically, and it was his idea to have Copeland, but there was a problem. After Copeland wrote the score, Wyler wanted more usage made of the song that we hear Morris play on the piano in the film that Montgomery Clift's character plays. And Marianne, forgive me, but I'll just say that it's an actual French ballad called Plaisir d'amour. And so it's period appropriate, and Copeland agreed to incorporate it into the score, I believe, 3 times. And he did it quite subtly. But he writes that very strong theme that we hear at the beginning of the trailer, and we hear it for about literally 10 seconds at the beginning of the movie. And then, as the film is released, the music goes into a sweeping orchestral arrangement of that French song that is going to be played on the piano. That music was not written by Aaron Copeland. He had written a complete main title that was a very astringent, powerful overture. It's actually very similar to the music that ends the film as Morris is pounding on the door. So Copeland was sort of bookending the film with these powerful themes. And after he left the film, Copeland discovered, and this is not unusual for Hollywood, that the director had decided that he wanted that song, that melody featured for the main title. And a far lesser known composer named Nathan Van Cleve, who later wrote some very good television scores for Twilight Zone and other things, he wrote that big, fulsome, romantic version of Plaisir d'amour that you hear on the main title. And then, as you see Aaron Copeland's name, the music switches back to Aaron Copeland's music. And I think that that's the one mistake the movie makes. If you don't know about it, you're probably not going to notice it. But when you hear what Copeland wrote, it was better. And the other cue of Copeland's that was dropped and replaced by another very big triumphant statement of that ballad is when Catherine and Morris are reunited in the rain, when she comes back from the trip, and you hear it there. So for about 30 seconds, perhaps, they threw out Copeland's music and put that in. Well, when Copeland saw the movie, he was furious, and he didn't care about scoring movies, so he released a press release saying that he was very unhappy that music he wrote for the film wasn't used, especially for the main title. He didn't write it, he disowned it, and he said that the film had been a very happy experience for that. And wouldn't you know that this was the movie that won him his only Academy Award for Best Score, and deserved it, because the rest of the music is his, and we could do a whole talk on that, but won't, about how great his score is. But when he won that Academy Award, he was so upset about having his main title dropped and that other music that he never collected his Oscar, and he never scored another Hollywood film again.
You had mentioned that he does make a comeback in the early 60s with the film by Jack Garfine, Something Wild.
Yes, which just shows, how unusual, what an independent thinker Copeland was. And yeah. He loved having his music played. He made many appearances on television. I got to interview him for my Bernard Herrmann book near the end of his life. And I encourage listeners to hear his viewers to see Of Mice and Men, the flawed movie of our town that nevertheless has a gorgeous Copeland score, The Red Pony. So, he left a terrific body of film work.
That's phenomenal. This is wonderful information, Stephen. And and to add to the political tensions you were alluding to earlier, also mention should be made of the actress Selena Royale, who played Mona Freeman. That's the wife of the Ray Collins character. She was subsequently blacklisted in Hollywood due to her left-leaning political alliances. So, and William Wyler was a big opponent of that and got into trouble himself for opposing a lot of what was being done to artists in Hollywood. Before we get to our next commenter, Dan Cahill, here's a contemporary a comment on the film from 1950 that I think is pretty intelligent. It appeared in Films in Review from a woman by the name of Hermione Isaacs, and she was talking about how Wyler uses the camera. She said that Wyler knows where to look. Shrewdly, he pivots his action around the central staircase that leads up 2 flights to Catherine's room, making her emotion changes in the way she moves up and down the stairs. The vista of rooms end to end in the narrow house provides many variations for the camera. And when their limits are reached, there are mirrors to extend the views. In such a setting, with the aid of the long focus camera, and maybe she's talking about almost a binocular.
She means deep focus.
That's that's exactly what she must mean, because that makes no sense otherwise. She must mean deep focus.
Yeah, definitely deep focus.
The director can deploy his actors for dialogue without appearing to hold the scene in static composition. And with that, I would love to hear what our very distinguished Dan Cahill, filmmaker, and he's also been a film instructor, has to say about the look of the Heiress. Dan, go ahead and join our discussion, and we'd love to hear what you think.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. I need to just get my display up here. Just will take me another moment to get it into widescreen. There we are. Well, here we are with one of the great films, absolutely no contest on that. William Wyler's name is synonymous with quality, and I just want to begin. I want to read a couple of sentences from one of my favorite film writers, that being David Thompson. And this will take less than a minute. The point is that Wyler measured himself for consistency and care. He won 3 Best Director Oscars. He had 3 Best Pictures, and he helped get nominations for 36 performances, though not Olivia and Carrie, which may be the actor's best movie work. Wyler was never willing to say, "This one is for me." He didn't let his me get noticed. Very revealing comments, I think. So let's move into the movie itself. This is one of the early shots which shows you the atmosphere they're working in. This is Mariah, the servant, bringing upstairs the new dress for Catherine. And if this were a moving shot, you could see the reflection in the mirror at the top of the stairs of Catherine descending. Note how high the ceilings are here. It takes 2 of these long stairways to travel a full story. I will just make glancing reference now and maybe later on to the fact that I filmed some scenes in one of these actual locations along Washington Square North when I was in film school. This was for my thesis film. And boy, the stairs are accurate. They're long and narrow and, slightly scary. Here is another shot looking down on this stairway set as Catherine, now in her new dress, admires herself in the mirror on the way down to where she is going to be abused by her not so loving father. Wyler was good at setting up a tableau where the dynamics between the actors were apparent. And in this shot, Ralph Richardson has just berated his daughter for not being as good as her mother, who incidentally in the original work, it's revealed that the mother died in childbirth, which might explain why he is so utterly bitter over losing her to get this inferior daughter. Note Richardson's high point in this triangle. He commands the scene. Here we have the party scene with, this is sort of a typical wallflower at the party thing. I note the fact that they did not specifically frame Catherine in that archway. They have her a little off to the side, indicating that she is kind of clumsy in these situations. She didn't know exactly where to sit for the camera. Here we have a wonderful moment that first shows us that Catherine is impish and has a sense of humor. She has just made a comment to Aunt Lavinia that her deceased husband may not be looking down from heaven on them. And immediately after saying that, she held the fan up in front of her face for a few seconds while Lavinia reacted, and then she lowers the fan, and we can see this rather self-satisfied look that she scored a zinger for once. Enter Montgomery Clift, and here we get our first real look at him after several lines of dialogue. He is, interestingly enough, introduced off camera. We hear his voice. We don't see him until he sits down. And clearly, these two are interested in each other. No doubt about it. You don't need dialogue for that. I love this shot. This is the point at which we all start to like Morris Townsend. The thumbs up is a sign that he's a good sport. He's trying to help out Catherine, and he will hold on to the claret cup until she's ready. I don't know what a claret cup is, but I think I'd pass on it, frankly. Here we have, after their first kiss, Catherine dashes off in a flutter and a flurry. She's probably never been kissed before. And what this does is it leaves Clift standing in the shadows, in the darkness. We don't really know who he is. Another embrace between them. And once again, Wyler has been shrewd enough to put de Havilland full face here so we can see exactly how thrilled she is by the attention she's getting. This is one of the few actual lighting effects in the film. Catherine has just come upstairs with a single candle to rouse Aunt Lavinia and tell her all about what Morris has been proposing to her. And even though, once again, it's not visible in a single frame, the light on Lavinia and on Catherine flickers throughout the whole scene. Here we have another triangular composition with, once again, Dr. Austin, what's his name? It begins with an S, not important.
Austin Sloper.
Sloper, thank you. Thank you very much. Austin Sloper. And he is sort of, what's the word, orchestrating this discussion between Morris's sister, Mrs. Montgomery on the left, and Catherine, his daughter. And at this point, they're just making small talk, but you can tell he's really eager to hear what sort of bad things the sister will say about her brother. During the final confrontation between Clift and Richardson, we cut at the end of it to Catherine sitting on the steps looking down at them, which for one thing takes advantage of the depth of these scenes. And it also shows how distant she is from this conflict that's going on. She really doesn't know what has just evolved. This is probably my favorite shot in the film. We filmmakers talk about 2 shots and 3 shots. This is a rarity of a 4 shot where all of the characters in it are important. We know that Clift and de Havilland are having an important discussion about their relationship, but in the foreground, we get to watch Lavinia scowling at her husband, at her brother, who seems to feel above it all and just waiting to see what's going to collapse when they head off to Europe. Here we have de Havilland taking her what she thinks is her last glimpse of Washington Square. And note how Aunt Lavinia is hidden by the lace in the curtain. All that matters is Catherine's ravishing look and saying goodbye to where she has lived for so many years. Ah, yes, the sliding doors. In this film, they are used as a way of shutting things off, ending a scene. You pull them shut. In my film, I used it as the entrance of a murderer carrying a knife. I began with the close-up of hand opening the door, and we cut to a medium shot of the murderer with the knife as he comes in through the opening door. One of the best shots and edits I've ever made. And they use it to authentic effect here. It is one of the aspects that they got completely right. Those doors are in most of those homes if they haven't been remodeled. Here is another classic shot which illustrates depth of focus, as Max and Stephen were just saying. We see Dr. Sloper in the background, rendered even further in the background by a mirror and a door frame, and he's going to go through even another door frame at the very back, all of it in reasonably sharp focus so we can follow him. This could have been the last shot of Ralph Richardson in the film, and maybe it should have been, but this is a preceding scene that sets us up for the final nasty confrontation between the two of them. But you get the feeling that he is now diminished in importance in her life. He's now nothing but a tiny figure moving into the background. We're now up to the last scene, and a favorite shot of mine also is when Clift steps back from the door he's been pounding on, and he looks up at what I have always heard described as a sunrise window over a door. And what he sees is the lamp, I should say, that Catherine is carrying up the long stairs, diminishing. It's starting to fade out. And he knows that she is leaving the living room and heading upstairs to go to bed. Here we have the last shot of de Havilland in the film. And this is the one that begins with her coming up the steps, holding the lamp towards the camera. And then at the top of the steps, she turns to the left and proceeds up another short flight of steps. In this moment, we see the last look at Olivia de Havilland. And trying to describe this look can be a little frustrating. I wouldn't call it triumphant. I wouldn't call it joyous. But she seems to have arrived at an important moment in her life where she's transitioned through this ugly ducklings phase, and she is now a fully mature woman. I will illustrate one other interesting thing that has been mentioned by Stephen, is that William Wyler had more than a penchant, I'd say an obsession for shooting far, far too many takes. And de Havilland said in a interesting little interview on the Merv Griffin show, I believe it was, that she was carrying this lamp up the steps, which had a movie light inside it. It was not a flame, it was a light. And she was wired through her sleeve into a battery pack under her dress. And it was heavy. And after 40 takes, she arrived at the top step and said, "I'm hungry." And Wyler immediately said, "So am I. Let's wrap the scene." So I will add one other comment. If I had been directing and or editing this film, I would have used this shot as the very last shot. We don't need to go back and see that Montgomery Clift is still banging on the door. It's all we need to know just to hear him banging on the door as she moves into a better future going up the stairs. And gents, that's my show for today.
And what a show. And we'd like to see you, Daniel. I don't know if your video is on though.
It is.
It is. Okay. Oh, there you are. There you are.
Okay.
And I think that's a great editorial suggestion. I do agree that probably would have been a stronger final image.
Yeah.
You know, I always talk about my fantasy visits of going to libraries and looking at production reports. I'd love to spend some time at the Academy Library in Beverly Hills and looking at the Heiress production report from the Paramount Papers to see exactly how many takes they shot of these scenes. And do we have any data here to support these stories of 45 takes? I'm just curious.
Stephen?
Well, we have it from Olivia de Havilland, who was not prone. She seemed to always try to tell. I mean, she told stories very well, but she didn't resort to hyperbole like some people did to be entertaining on a talk show. And it certainly is documented from other films. And I would say there is an excellent biography of William Wyler. I'll have the name of it shortly, that did draw on the papers extensively, because my knowledge is secondhand from things like the Wyler biography, like this excellent Olivia de Havilland biography by Victoria Amador called Lady Triumphant. which Olivia's daughter helped. She worked on a final chapter, I believe, when her mother passed away for the paperback. So and the Academy Library hasn't opened quite yet, but when it does, I'll be happy, Max, to make a trip for all of our sakes and report.
I'm assigning you to go there and look at the Heiress production report. We want to hear back on that.
Gladly.
The transition that her Catherine makes, it's actually kind of chilling by the end. I mean, she really is a different person in that last sequence than what we've seen. Could you talk a little bit more about that, how she achieved that? And she really is holding her own to Ralph Richardson there. I mean, he's
oh yes,
a magnificent piece of acting on her part.
And that great line when she says, I was taught by masters," gives me a chill every time I hear it. But some of the techniques they use, I mean, first and foremost, of course, it was acting on de Havilland's part under Wyler's keen eye. They pulled her hair back. They they did treatment of her eyes. She speaks in a higher register when she's younger, and her voice deepens as the film goes along. Those are the most obvious changes to point out. But I'd say it was just done shot by shot, take by take. And I've seen the Heiress on stage. I saw the Cherry Jones production, which was incredibly powerful. I mean, the play is so well constructed that if you cast it and direct it well, it's really going to get a tremendous audience response. And it's interesting. The play has had a great success, and as Max, I believe you mentioned earlier, the movie was not the commercial success that they had hoped it would be. It was, you wouldn't think it, but for a film with mostly one setting, some others, but it was a pretty expensive movie, as you said, 2.6 million when that was above the norm, and it ultimately broke even. But I think it's just too sad, or let's say not mainstream enough. Not sad isn't the right word. The movie elicits too many complicated emotions, but it perhaps was never going to reach a wide audience. In the decades since its release, however, I think it is generally acknowledged to be de Havilland's finest film and one of Wyler's greatest, and certainly a worthy follow-up, as he had wanted to do, to Best Years of Our Lives. And he had been looking for something that would continue a look at America and class in America, and how people were treated. And so this really was, in a way, a perfect follow-up to Best Years of Our Lives, as different as they are.
I just realized when I had re-watched The Heiress the other night, I had not seen it, I think, since hundreds of years ago. And my first viewing was on television as a child. And I'll never forget the scene towards the end when Richardson character, when the doctor makes those horrible remarks about her, you probably can quote verbatim, but I remember as a child being so shocked that a father would say that about his daughter, and her response, devastating.
It is. I think it's one of the cruelest, if not the cruelest realistic depiction of a father and daughter, because you don't see that in the early scenes. You certainly see him being dismissive, imperious, patronizing to her, but the utter cruelty and careless, the lack of any feeling he has towards her is so apparent. And speaking of feeling, I just have one other little anecdote to share about something that William Wyler did that was very smart music-wise. When they previewed the film, the big moment when Catherine realizes that Morris isn't coming and she begins yelling, "Morris, Morris, Morris." Well, I think preview audiences, when they are reaching a really powerful, disturbing moment, that's when you often get a bad laugh. Is sometimes after a film's release, just because people are anxious, are nervous. I've seen that happen. But apparently that was a moment when Copeland's original music was sort of more romantic, and it was not dissonant enough, ironically, given that that's the reverse of what Wyler did with the main title. He had a more passive kind of cue there. And after the preview, Wyler said to Copeland, would you please write another piece of music cue? We really have to make people feel that this is the moment of absolute horror for her. And Copeland did, and wrote that terrific cue that underscores that moment of terrible realization. And that's an example of how just a little tweaking of music can make such a difference.
That's magnificent. And I was, go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, I just wanted to interject. I don't know if this is the right moment or not, but I really do mean this. Ralph Richardson is one of my very, very favorite actors. I mean, I'm not doing any ballyhoo to get to that. And just as a measure of his worth to his peers, there were three great British lions of the stage and screen that were contemporaries of his. One would be John Gielgud, the other would be Laurence Olivier. And the other two always said that Richardson was the best of the lot. And you could even toss in Obi-Wan Guinness at some point, because even though he's 10 years younger, he always paid his tributes. And incidentally, Richardson, being a couple of years older than the others, was also the first to be knighted, which may have meant a lot to them. I don't know if they took that into consideration personally, but I would recommend to those of you who want to see Ralph Richardson do something somewhat unusual, there is a wonderful goofy comedy from the late 60s called The Wrong Box.
I was hoping you were going to say that.
Oh, yeah.
1966, great all-star comedy, Michael Caine, don't miss it. Peter
John
Sellers.
Mills, Peter Cook and Dudley Moore. I mean, it's a brilliant film. Catch it if you can.
Yeah.
And he is magnificent in this film. And Stephen, you were talking about earlier, his character seems to be pretty supportive of the daughter. But I guess today we would call this a backhanded compliment or passive aggression. Early on, when she's dressed to go to the ball, and he's commenting on how stunning she looks, and then the mother's memory is evoked, and he reminds her, well, your mother was fair, she dominated the color. In other words, you can never possibly do that. He doesn't say that, but it's this backhanded, destructive comment.
The playwrights did a great job in setting things up.
Oh, yeah.
That's what led to the tableau I showed of her having her head down like this as he's about to leave the room.
And I know we're going to be opening it up to questions. Just before we do, just thoughts on Montgomery Clift. I mean, when he first, there's a close-up of him when the camera goes in after she leaves the ball, and he appears to be falling in love. Is that a red herring? Do you feel that he wasn't capturing enough of the fortune hunter that the role required? What are both of your thoughts on that?
I love that shot because I think you can read it many ways. You can read him thinking, if this is working, I'm going to be incredibly rich soon. I think Wyler found the perfect balance of it. When the movie wasn't successful, Wyler, like perhaps everyone does, he started second guessing himself, and he said, did we make the Montgomery Clift character too likable for too long? And I think absolutely not, because in the book, it's much clearer much sooner that he is after the money. And it just isn't as interesting. That ambiguity is great. And the play has a great turning moment of it too. It's just, for me, it works. And I know he's from a different generation, but that to me only fits the story. It fits the story well. I don't find him overly anachronistic. I think that the three different styles, because Olivia learned in Hollywood, she didn't have the chance to really do much stage work before Warner Brothers scooped her up. So Hollywood was her training ground. Richardson, obviously, the stage in Britain, and Clift was of the method. So I think it's really a surprisingly successful, if you will, marriage of those different styles.
And you really, for the sake of Catherine's character, you need to see what she sees in Clift, why she is so enchanted with him. And if all we knew was that he's a snake in the grass, that would make us look askance at Catherine for why can't you see this guy for what he is? So it's a very good balance of motivations, I think.
We kind of want to believe he's being sincere for her sake because we feel sorry for her. But it's that scene, I don't know, is it the rain scene where he finds out that the inheritance may not be what he thinks it's going to be, and you're trying to read his reaction to it. That's pretty powerful as well. We could go on, gentlemen, but I'm sure we have comments and thoughts from our viewers. Before we get to those, and I know Marianne will help us take questions from the audience, a reminder that coming up on the 23rd, I will be giving the next New Plaza online presentation. It will be on filming the dance, the great age of Hollywood musicals. I've given a version of this before, but I decided to gut it like a fish and change it up. And we have some new material. We've given it some new energy. So I hope you'll join me. And here's a little teaser as to what we can expect from this presentation. We look forward to seeing you there. And now, Marianne, you can assist us with thoughts and questions from our attendees.
Hi, everybody. Such a wonderful movie. So much that we learned from you guys. If you want to ask a question, for those who don't know, please go to the reaction button and hit the raise your hands. And I see that Nina is already unmute and start her video. So Nina, you start.
Yes, I remember reading about the filming of the Heiress that Montgomery Clift being right out of the actor's studio and the Stanislavski method was quite uncomfortable in reacting with Olivia de Havilland. He felt she didn't have the improvisatory ability, the spontaneity, that she was too attached to Wyler's direction. And he felt it stifled his performance because the method was so very different from what Olivia de Havilland delivered, which I thought was very interesting. And I remember reading that when Clift starred opposite Elizabeth Taylor, who was then 18 years old, in A Place in the Sun, he taught her a lot. He helped her give the performance that he could react to. It was just very interesting about his style and how it sort of conflicted with Olivia's old Hollywood Golden Age style. I thought that was interesting.
Well, now that you mention it, Nina, it is a fascinating study in three different acting styles. You have the Olivia de Havilland style from Hollywood trained, and you have Clift and his method, and you have Richardson and his Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts style, presumably, that it offers but in a way it works. You normally think there'd be a clashing of actors, but it works. I'm sure you gentlemen could add some thoughts to that.
Can I just say, I think that before we stereotype Olivia too much as a Hollywood acting type, she was a really good listener to other actors. Clift went into this film with a great deal of insecurity, and I think it's entirely appropriate that Wyler spent more time working with her on a very difficult, complex role with subtle changes in each scene. And it wasn't Clift's movie to direct, so I'm on Team Olivia and Wyler on this one. And
I am too, by the way.
Clift was very insecure, and he was. As I mentioned, that diary he was writing during the movie, and he was in awe of Richardson, and that even frustrated him. And he wrote down at one point, "Can't he ever make a mistake?" And it wasn't like a compliment; he was like angry, you know. And so I think that Clift felt like he was the least experienced person here, and he often disliked his own performances in films, and he didn't like his performance in this one. So, you know, to me, I think she's a terrific listener in the film. I think she was giving to other actors. I think he brought what he brought to it, and that was a certain insecurity but a brilliance in performance. I am a huge fan of his as an actor, but I don't take his side on this one. Of course, I wasn't there.
Because in a way, both their characters have to be insecure. He's insecure about his social standing, and she's insecure because she's not used to being courted by a man.
And I have to say that on film sets, that isn't where you improvise. I mean, you have rehearsals, and that's what you I'm not saying anyone here, but people going into film have to realize that you don't go on the set with a certain number of days scheduled and a certain number of people available for a block of time and say, let's figure out who the people are. You know, that's great if you're doing a play, but not on film.
It's been done, but it's been done erratically. When you start playing those games, the results can be problematic.
Yeah, and even Sidney Lumet, who loved to have rehearsals, would do a lengthy rehearsal before the filming started. But once you've got 50 to 100 people standing around, you just have to know where you're going with it.
Could I also mention that a great Ralph Richardson performance on film is of the patriarch in Long Day's Journey into Night.
Oh,
it's a very powerful performance. And for me, it was particularly interesting because Frederick March is one of my favorite all-time actors, and I had seen him on the stage with it. So it was interesting to see these giant actors, the two of them, Both do it very, very well. But that's a great Ralph Richardson performance too.
Thank you, Nina.
Well, thank you, Nina.
Thank you, Nina.
We have a question because you mentioned rehearsal, Stephen. Jean is asking, how long would they rehearse?
Well, I don't know. I don't know what the schedule was on this film, but you would have a certain amount of pre-rehearsal. Like there's the rehearsal figuring out the performance, and then there's the equally important rehearsal on film of blocking for the camera. So you're literally moving in the right places, following your marks, and being in the light. And that had to be. There was a little more latitude granted when you have this deep focus approach that Wyler loved to use, especially in the 40s and 50s, where actors could move in frame and not go out of focus. But it really varies so much from film to film. I'm sorry, I'm not able to provide a specific on this one.
Thank you. Marjorie, please, can you unmute and start your video?
Hi,
Marjorie.
thank you. I just have a little opinion about that last look that you mentioned. To me, I took it as the satisfaction of revenge that she got, but I didn't see her as being a happy person. And I'd like something clarified. I didn't see her as on her way to a better future, as somebody mentioned, but I would like to change my mind on that. So I'd like to know why you think she's on her way to a better future. To me, I saw her as really a broken woman who won't even do another needlepoint again. As she said, I shall never do another. So why would you think she's on her way to a better future?
Well, I think I was the one who said that, and she is putting a bad past behind her as one starting point. She's through dealing with these two men who have both not treated her terribly well. And that, I think, is a starting point for a new kind of life that she could have. She is rich. She commands the house. And I think she has a brighter future than her past ever was. That's just my reading of it.
Okay, yeah.
I like Daniel's optimism. I think she's a prisoner in that house and she's never going to leave, and that she's become her father. Sorry.
No, unfortunately, that's exactly the way I see it. I mean, she's nasty even to Mariah and all that. That's exactly the way I see that. She has now just given up.
It's so subtle. I'd say hard. She's been hardened. I mean, this has happened to people maybe we all know in life who've been very hurt by things, but I think she's become just so hard that she can never really trust anyone again. But yeah. I like Daniel's happier scenario too.
Yeah, no, I'm hoping Daniel is right, but I have to agree with Stephen.
Well, let's all get together and write a sequel.
There we go.
Exactly. Well, yeah, it kind of would be like a Gone with the Wind. Does Rhett Butler come back or not? So this would be, does she go on to a better future or not? But thank you. It's a fabulous movie, and this talk is just wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marjorie.
Thank you.
Just one thing, guys. We just learned now that William Hurt died. Right?
Oh,
now.
no. Oh, yes. No.
Yeah. So just
sorry to hear that.
Yes, we have
it strikes me as he's not old enough to die yet, but
71, like 72-year-old.
Okay, that's too young.
Well, we'll definitely be acknowledging him in future programs. Sorry to hear that.
We should. So now I'm going to ask Ellen to unmute and start her video. Ellen, please.
Hi. Fabulous discussion. I think I see this film once a year, something like that. As soon as it's on, I sit down and I watch it. My husband says, not again. And I said, yes, again. That's the way I go. I have a comment. It started off, she addressed it a little bit about the embroidery, the aspect of that, turning it, flipping it over, tying the knot and being done. And also the buttons, that she brings back from Europe for Morris, and she actually goes up and gets them and gives that to him. So those objects are very important. The clocks are very important in the room. You want to discuss that?
one thing I can say is a little peripheral to that. And Max, I'm so glad you talked about Edith Head and her intense study for accuracy. Olivia de Havilland accompanied her on that. And again, it's why I am a little dismissive, if you'll forgive me, of Clift saying, "Oh, that Hollywood actress," because she similarly immersed herself in the time and the details, and she went with Edith Head to those places and studied the clothes and talked about the clothes, and really, so there was every effort made to have the right clothes, and I think de Havilland as an actor knew how important the clothes would be in playing that part in its various stages.
And the fact of giving him the buttons in the end, I thought it kind of ties it all in. That's it. Got the buttons.
Like the last,
it's like a booby prize.
The last event in their commercial transaction, you know?
Yeah.
She's basically saying, okay, this is it, buddy. Bye.
Yeah.
Enjoy your little stones.
And I think all that is the play, by the way, that I think that those things are not in the James original. I could be mistaken. I don't remember every page of the book, but it's just, everything is just sharper and more specific and, dramatic, in the stage version and film.
I'm only saying this because I looked at the last chapter today, so it's not a brilliant memory here, but in that scene in the novel, there is no gift of anything given to him.
Wow. But
it may have taken place earlier, but not at the very end of the novel.
And speaking of the novel and what happened next to the character, just one thing I was going to mention is that evidently that James got the idea for this book from a true story. There was a London actress, I believe her name was Frances Ann Kimball, who told him that her brother was Morris, that her brother was this handsome young man who had gone after this woman for her money. He to use a modern term, flaked out on it and then tried to get her back and was turned away by her. And James used that to write the book.
That's amazing.
Okay, thank you. Great, guy.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you, Ellen.
Patricia, please, can you unmute and start your video?
Hi, I'm Liz
Yeah.
D'Angio. It's great to be here. And full disclosure, I haven't seen the movie recently, but I have read the book recently. And I was in a book club. And the ending, I do agree with, and this is just a comment, I strongly agree with Daniel, that, to me, the ending shows hope for her in the sense that she really grew up. She faced her father, she saw him for who he was, and she started to behave and taking care of herself and make decisions for herself. And I think she just grew up, and it's a very difficult situation to have such a contemptuous father, but she was able to make certain choices for herself. And to me, the ending really, she was able to stand up to Morris also. It's a difficult book and ending, but so is life, and especially for that time, for a woman, of that time. So anyway, thanks for listening.
Well, thank you, Liz. Thanks for that contribution. And I know you'll enjoy seeing the movie again.
I definitely will. I was just, last night I just fell asleep. So I couldn't watch it. So thanks.
Thank you.
So Patricia, now, can you start your video and unmute?
Hey, so I just wanted to say that as far as the ending is concerned, I agree that she has grown up. She's made a decision on her own. She's had experience with a man now, so she knows what that's like. Her father is dead, and she has her wonderful aunt supporting her. So she's got a lot to look forward to. She looks, triumphant is probably too strong of a word, but she looks satisfied with the decision that she's made. And the things I mentioned, her father being gone and her having had experience, I think she has a life to look forward to. And she's giving up her tapestry, which, kind of defined her a little bit as an old maid in a way. So yeah, I think the ending is positive as far as she's concerned.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. And I'll just say that unlike the book, in which the coda takes place many years later, they do make it a shorter period of time in the play and the film. So that does suggest that that Catherine has more years ahead of her.
Okay, thank you, Patricia.
Thank you.
Barry, please, can I ask you to start your video and mute? Barry? Barry has disappeared.
No.
Barry? Okay, I don't see Barry anymore, so let's do IR.
Hi there.
IR.
I miss Barry also.
Oh,
Whoever he
voilà.
is,
Okay, Barry, here you are. Okay.
Is Barry back? No.
Barry's back. So then we'll get to you, IR. We'll start with Barry first.
Okay.
Barry? He's there, but
You can hear me, right?
Can hear you.
Okay, now do I click my name now for the video?
No.
Oh, I see it. Start video. Never mind. I see it. Okay. Should be good to go here. There we are. All righty.
Voilà.
Hello, folks.
Hi.
First off, hi. I have about 1,600 films in my library from silent to studio era. Some days I have to come home and see Strangers on a Train. Some days I have to come home and see Double Indemnity. Some day Way Down East. Some days Shawshank Redemption.
This sounds like my life. Wait a minute. This is very weird.
Many days, the Heiress. But I'm struck by how history is rewritten by the survivors, YouTube being such a resource, and Olivia de Havilland has given interviews for the latter part of her life. And she talked about the relationship between Monty and Ralph, about how Ralph had done it on stage. He was going to do it that way. He didn't care what she did. And Monty did everything to his coach. And so she felt like she was acting in a vacuum. So that's what she kind of sort of said. I found the trailer at the beginning interesting because it gave away more information than the trailers that I have seen. Also, and most importantly, where it identifies Monty as a fortune hunter, which I'm sorry about that because, you know, it kind of takes away the first discovery moment.
Yes.
There are so many moments in this movie that I sometimes have to come home and see. The moment where she comes home and she says, I live here. He says, that's why I'm here. And she drops her purse and it slides down her skirt. Go, phew, boom. There's an increased sound and I always laugh there. Also, the full court press that Monty does when he gets up from the piano, walks over, stands there, descends to the couch, leans in and say, you know, the full court press of this guy in this moment. He has never been more beautiful. Referencing Edith Head, she talked about how they patted his back and his shoulders to make him look like that because he was stoop-shouldered and it was kind of concave. And so they kind of put him in a bodysuit Superman corset underneath the suit. His V is amazing. His Victorian V is amazing. I think that Miriam Hopkins is remarkable in this. Now, going back to like, you know, Story of Temple Drake and Becky Sharp up through the Betty Davis movies, she has no brittleness. She is so warm. You know, my dear, why couldn't you have been a little more clever? It's just brilliantly laid in. Daniel, you've talked about the first time that Catherine displays wit at the party. I submit it was earlier in the bedroom when Lavinia is talking about cooking something at the vestry, and Olivia says, then you've been lying to me, Aunt. I thought you lived on love alone. You know, so I think that may be the first. I could be mistaken.
If I can defend myself, I just want to say my mission is the look of the film.
That's what I figured you were coming from.
Where the fan really contributed to her reaction.
You were coming from cinematography, and I take your point. Yeah. I take your point totally.
And one more thing, Barry. I don't mean to dismiss you, and frankly, Stephen and Max and I haven't talked about this, but I think you need far more movies in your library. 16.
Oh, dude, I have everything from a Lego. I have 1,600. I'm just talking. Sometimes I come home and there are moments I have to like pull out and watch. Pinocchio. You know, who knows what I'm going to do? But
we totally understand.
Yeah. This movie is kind of like Wizard of Oz to me. You know, it's like, oh, that's my favorite scene. Oh, that's my favorite. You think you're going to go get a drink or something, and it's your favorite scene. Copeland, I had experience of orchestrally, his fanfare of for the common man, etc. In this, it is so incisive from the very first chord. Brilliant stuff, I think. One bald man's opinion here, rambling.
But brilliant, Ram. No, absolutely brilliant observations, Barry. Thank you so much. And please come back more and more.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you, Barry.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. Might I just say,
can I have you now, Ihar?
Yes, Stephen was going to say something.
very briefly, if people want to hear Aaron Copeland's original music for the main title and just get a little taste of the score, there's a very nice suite that, of course, has been posted to YouTube. It's just 7 or 8 minutes long. It's conducted by Leonard Slatkin. So if you just put in Aaron Copeland, the Heiress on YouTube, this suite of music will pop up and you can hear what the main title was going to be. So if you want to be a completist, play the first part of that against the movie and you'll see how it was supposed to start.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Stephen.
I'm a big fan of Aaron Copeland. I think that he doesn't get the respect that he deserves. I think he's serious world class, one of the best of all time. And Stephen, did he actually not pick up nor have delivered his sole Oscar win?
Well, he did not have much respect for Hollywood or perhaps the Academy at that point. Having not ever been in his home, I can't attest that it never found its way to him. But I know that he did not accept it in 1950, the year after the film was received. And that he was very, very unhappy. And Wyler reportedly attempted to have him score other films that Wyler made, like The Big Country and Friendly Persuasion, which you could imagine having Aaron Copeland scores. Fortunately, Jerome Moross wrote one of the greatest film scores of all time for The Big Country, I think. But yeah, Copeland just he in the concert world, you might have a conductor saying, "Can we trim these bars?" and the composer can say no. So I think that discovery, that especially the overture, the prelude, whatever you want to call a main title for music, that opening had been just almost completely thrown out, really incensed him. And he was not a yeller like his friend Bernard Herrmann. He was a quieter man, but he was furious over that.
I just want to quickly point out that the final Filmcraft session in April for New Plaza Cinema on movie music, I am going to be doing a little section on Copeland's Of Mice and Men score, thanks to a brilliant book that reprinted some of the sheet music, and we'll be doing a comparison between scene and music just to give him some attention. Just wanted to mention that.
I look forward to that.
I think you have one more question.
Yes. What a missed opportunity, cinematic opportunity, to have Aaron Copeland score some of the greatest Westerns in cinema. But by the way, Daniel mentioned that Montgomery Clift's character was introduced while he was off screen, which got me to thinking, I wonder what you would say is your favorites screen introductions to a character. My favorite is the descent of Katharine Hepburn in Suddenly Last Summer, coming down that elevator while speaking. I wonder what you guys have chosen for yours.
That's an amazing question. I have a nomination. How about Robert Shaw as Quint in Jaws with the fingernails on the blackboard?
Nice.
That comes to mind. I don't know.
I wish I had a little time to prepare for this brilliant question, because I always think that we don't have enough great entrances for movie characters these days, and I miss them because there are several from history that are escaping me right now. That
I throw out one. I'll say Harry Lime in The Third Man.
Well, okay, there you go. That has to be the ultimate. Has to be.
Active light.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, IR.
Thank you, IR. Vivian, we have 2 questions left. Oh, now 3. And after that, it will be, Viviana, please.
Yes, hi. We have talked so much about the ending, and thanks to Liz, we knew a little more about the ending from the novel versus the movie, which is really interesting. I was I was paying attention. I watched it with a friend on, we both watched it and we were on Zoom talking through it, which was a lot of fun. And we were both just riveted at the end by Olivia de Havilland's performance when she was listening to the knocking, and it just ranged so much. And I was wondering if you guys, if you remember all those little, like I was looking for, is she cracking? Is she, like what's she thinking? What's she going through? Which I think says a lot about what her future will be. I was hoping that you guys had noticed something or can say something about that.
I just remember it was chilling. That was my reaction. I bet you gentlemen could add to that, I'm sure.
I think it's a testament to what a fine actress for the camera de Havilland had become by 1949, because the fun is in our not knowing. The fact that so much of this conversation has been, what was she thinking? What a great question. Some critics have compared it to the last shot of the Garbo film Queen Christina, when Garbo is just completely emotionless, and they hold on that shot for, like a minute, and it's the fade out shot of the movie. And Ruben Malmuyan wanted the audience to say, what is she thinking? What is she thinking? And I'm sure that to some extent was what Wyler and de Havilland were after, to have us ask this question. And I think the best thing is that there isn't an answer. That's one reason I think people have gone back to this movie so many times, in spite of the painfulness of some of it, but the power of it and the ambiguity of it. And again, that's to me what really makes the film version superior to both book and as much as I think the play is terrific, the play is just that those extra beats that only a camera can capture when you're that close to a human face, whether it's Morris or Catherine in particular. I don't think Dr. Sloper has much of a heart anymore to convey different emotions, but I think de Havilland makes this movie endlessly rewatchable.
I will simply agree with everything Stephen just said.
So with that, let's ask Susan, and then after Susan, it will be Patricia. And that will be our last question. So Susan, please, can you unmute and start your video?
Yes. I'm trying to do that.
Well, we can hear you. We can hear you. You can proceed with the question.
I just wanted to say that for me, two words, betrayal and bitterness. Because I feel that she was betrayed, and that is what led to her power and maturity. And it's like the price to be mature and to be powerful is to be betrayed. It's almost like those life experiences gave her the power to go on and to be powerful. And the other observation I have is that in the scenes when he's getting very close to her, it's like she puts her head back. She keeps retreating from him. And I was wondering, is it because she is afraid of her emotions of love, or whether she is having doubts? There are several shots where he's approaching her and she's pulling back. And I wondered what you think about that.
She's never been touched or held by anyone in her life before then, and it's making her uncomfortable, is my take. What do you think, Daniel, Max?
I would agree.
Yeah.
If I knew where these shots occurred in the narrative, it would help to know how much her father may have poisoned her about Morris, calling him a fortune hunter, and that those doubts did sink in sincerely.
There's one, and you said it, didn't you, Daniel, where after he kisses her hand, you can see her just, her reaction to that. It's just she's not comfortable with any kind of physical intimacy because it's been denied to her by everyone except by her aunt.
She wasn't ready for it. She had no idea how to react. So,
yeah,
I can't add to that. I think that's right on the money.
Yeah, like she's afraid of him and she's afraid of herself.
And also feeling unworthy of his affection. She still can't believe that he would be attracted to her.
Right. That's right. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Susan.
Patricia, please.
Yes, and I just wanted to add to the introduction of a character, Cary Grant in Suspicion. That was really a wonderful introduction. If anyone remembers that, you see him from the back, and Ingrid Bergman, she's talking to him.
Oh, Notorious. Notorious, yes.
Notorious, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Notorious.
And he plays Devlin. I love this name, Devlin.
Devlin, right.
Okay, you guys, I've said it. We have not two other hands. After that, I'm stopping because we.
Okay, I know.
We're bolting the door. We're bolting the door.
Too many good questions. We have to stop.
Exciting moment here. So Laurie and then Jerry. And Jerry, you are the last person. So Laurie first. Hi, Laurie.
Hi. As I was watching Olivia de Havilland as the ugly girl when she was shy and retiring, and how beautiful she was when she was loving him, and then how she almost was sort of queenly when she took on the mantle of being the woman of the house and everything that drove her to that. And I thought it was brilliant how much she conveyed, and it was subtle. I mean, Montgomery Clift should have appreciated that. It was subtle.
And very brave too for Olivia de Havilland to appear so unflatteringly in the beginning, because back then, you know, big stars didn't want to do that, and she took that risk and did it brilliantly.
Yeah.
Thank you, Laurie.
Thank you,
Laurie. And voila, Jerry is the last person to ask a question. Hi, Jerry.
Well, thank you. I'm going to go back to what was just said before about her pulling back from him when he was kissing her, because that happens throughout the movie several times. And in the beginning, it's a different interpretation. And in the very last scenes when he comes to her, then it's more of she detests him. She's angry. She doesn't want him, but she wants to fool him. So she's a different person. And those movements mean a different thing to me.
That's
lots of interpretation in this film. You know, this is why it's so rich, and you can dip right into it again in another year or two. It's a tribute to the film that there are so many different interpretations.
And especially after these discussions, you want to go back and watch it again.
I want to see it again now.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you, guys. It was wonderful. And now I'm going to give the floor to Sean, our own Sean. Voila.
Hi.
Sean.
Once again, what a great discussion, you guys. I mean, we knew it would be great because who's better than Olivia de Havilland, and this performance is just such a wonderful film. So I just want to bring up a few things. Besides thanking everyone, of course, we missed Lori Turchin this week. IR mentioned that to me. She always adds so much value. She's on vacation this week, so we're sorry that we missed Lori, and she'll be back again in 2 weeks. Which I want to tell you what's coming up. The Filming the Dance, the Hollywood Musicals lecture on the 23rd of March. We saw that great trailer that Max provided. And then that Sunday, we're going to talk about Singin' in the Rain, one of the all-time great musicals. So that will be a very, very fun discussion on the Sunday, the 27th of March. I also want to remind everyone, you can find all of our information at newplazacinema.org, and you can find these under lectures and talkbacks, so you can see that there. But also, we have our theater in New York. If you happen to be in New York and tonight you want to see a great film, Red Rocket, which is just an excellent film, is at 7:30. The 7:30 showing tonight about a washed-up film actor. I think everyone would really love this movie, a small independent film that's getting a lot of rave reviews. And so next week, I know we're going to have Power of the Dog in our theater. We're very lucky that the distributor Netflix has chosen our theater as quality enough to do that. So we're looking forward to that. IR just added a detail about Red Rocket, not just a washed up actor, but washed up porn actor. So I left out that little detail for Red Rocket. Our theater is at 263rd West 86th Street between West End and Broadway. It's a great location. Subway stop is right there. So if you're around, we'd love to have you join us. Our films are Thursdays through Sundays, and at 7:30 tonight is Red Rocket. So we look forward to seeing you all in a couple of weeks when we talk about Singing in the Rain. And everyone, thanks so much. Our audience is so much fun. They're so strong, and it's just so great. Thank you. Have a good week, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Have a wonderful week.